Hi guys, welcome to the Astro Dude. In today's video, we're going to be interviewing Dr. Seth Shostak. Dr. Seth Shostak is a senior astronomer at the SETI Institute, and it was a great privilege to have him on. He's also an author of many books. I'm currently reading his book, Confessions of an Alien Hunter, and it's a pretty good book with a lot of great information. He's also appeared in many TV shows, documentaries, and sci-fi films. I really liked the TV show NASA Unexplained Files that he appeared on. And it was a great time talking to him. And before we get into the interview, make sure to like and subscribe since there's no reason not to. And if you already have, then you're just, I guess, awesome. Anyways, let's get into the interview. So we have Dr. Seth Shostak on here. And so tell us a bit about yourself, your background, how you got interested into radio astronomy.
Well, I was interested in astronomy at a very young age. I built a telescope by age 10. I spent a lot of time at planetariums and read books about astronomy. So it was an early interest. It wasn't my only interest, I have to say, but it was one that I definitely had.
So you talk about radio astronomy. How much has radio astronomy changed since it was first invented by Nikola Tesla in 1899 and claimed that he saw a signal or received signals from Martians?
Yeah, well, actually, radio astronomy really wasn't invented or at least discovered or used until the 1930s. There was a guy working at the Bell Telephone Laboratories in New Jersey, and he was the first one to realize that there were some signals coming from space. In fact, it was from the Milky Way, and he made a map of the Milky Way. So that was the beginning. Tesla, as did Marconi, both thought that they had found signals coming from Mars, but they were not coming from Mars, and they didn't have the kind of equipment that would allow them to find anything going from Mars anyhow, but they were deluded.
How could SETI improve their radio telescopes in the future?
Well, you can always build bigger ones. That's one approach, and we do that. I mean, the biggest radio dish in the world, single dish radio telescope, was in Puerto Rico, the Arecibo antenna, but that collapsed about 8 or 9 months ago. Today, the biggest one is in China, the so-called fast radio telescope. And it basically looks like Arecibo. They just copied it, but made it bigger. So that's the biggest single dish. But there are other kinds of radio telescopes being built that use lots and lots of smaller antennas, which has a lot of advantages. And you can, in fact, equal the performance of one giant antenna with lots and lots of small ones, and it's a lot cheaper.
Would putting radio telescopes into space be of any benefit?
Well, I don't think so. In general, right? I mean, you put telescopes into space because you want to sort of circumvent the deleterious effects of the atmosphere. For example, why is the James Webb Space Telescope in space? Why was the Hubble Space Telescope in space? Those are both optical telescopes, but by putting them in space, they don't have to deal with the messing up of the imagery that you get when you're down here on Earth because of the atmosphere. Now, radio telescopes generally don't suffer that because the atmosphere doesn't do much to radio signals. So in general, putting them in space is not either necessary or even a good idea because it would be very hard to put a really big radio antenna into space.
Would there be any way of is radio background noise a big problem with radio telescopes? Is there any way to mitigate it?
Yeah, it is. And there are schemes to reduce what is called RFI, radio frequency interference, which is just, all the electrical equipment that we have on Earth for our own benefit, for our own convenience, but it also messes up the telescopes, and in particular, satellites, Earth satellites, which are used to, handle transatlantic telephone calls or to bounce television signals from Europe to the United States and that sort of thing. These satellites, of course, all have transmitters on board. And those transmitters are up there in the sky. And a couple of them are always visible no matter where you are. So that's a real problem, how to get around that interference.
And so for radio telescopes, do you think using that to find extraterrestrial life is the best method, or is there other means that are looking more promising now?
Well, there are other ways. I mean, there are several experiments, about 3 actually, that are looking for flashing lasers. And they may exist. And we haven't looked for them in the past very much. So that's a new technology. But the other thing you could look for is what are called artifacts, just something that really advanced societies could build, right? I mean, these societies could be billions of years more advanced than we are, not just millions, they could be billions. And so what sort of things are they building? What do they do with their time, right? I mean, maybe they're just watching reality television shows, but if they're building anything big, we might see that.
How about the Oumuamua asteroid? There's a lot of claims that that was an ancient artifact of an alien space probe. Do you think that? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, there's an astronomer at Harvard by the name of Avi Loeb who thinks that Oumuamua could very well be, something deliberately constructed. Now, not too many astronomers agree with that assessment, but in any case, nobody can tell anymore because Oumuamua is long gone. We can't even see it anymore, let alone find out more about it. Most of the people that I talk to who, study asteroids say Oumuamua was an asteroid or a chip off an asteroid or a chip off a planet. But Avi Loeb is, not so easily convinced. He thinks that indeed these could be, Oumuamua could have been something sent deliberately into our solar system by aliens.
Would there be ways of looking for it if a future interstellar asteroid like Oumuamua enters?
Well, what you want to do is just chase after it, right? I mean, if you could get up close to it, you could solve the problem. But to get up close to it, these things are moving at a pretty high rate of speed, typically 15 or 20 miles per second. So you need a rocket that's faster than that. And if it's far away, you've got to allow for the time it takes for you to get over to where the asteroid is. It's hard, but in principle, you could do it. And when you got up close, you'd make a photo, and then maybe that would solve the question. That would answer the question of what is it?
Could there be? You talked about alien spacecrafts. Could there be ways of looking for warp drives?
Well, I mean, I don't know what a warp drive is, other than in Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek, if you want to, use a warp drive, you just call up the engine room and you say, Scotty, to put the pedal to the metal, and you zip off it faster than the speed of light. But physics doesn't seem to allow any travel faster than the speed of light. So warp drive is something that was, of course, invented by Hollywood screenwriters, but it's not at all clear that any such thing actually exists. It would require physics that we don't understand or have. So I don't know about warp drive. It sounds like a great thing, but if you really want to go to the stars, you just have to be patient. Maybe put yourself to sleep for 50,000 years, and then you can go.
What about the some of the objects that have been found have been like the universe expanding faster than the speed of light?
Well, yes, but that's okay. Space isn't limited to the speed of light. Space can expand faster, but it's any matter, right? Anything that has mass, right? Planets, can't expand faster than the speed of light. And I think Woody Allen once said he was worried that Brooklyn was expanding faster than the speed of light, but it turns out it's not. But it's okay for space to expand very much at any speed, because it's just the distance between two things.
Could there be possibly an alien spaceship that could use the expansion of space-time to travel faster than the speed of light?
Not that we know about, but of course we don't know everything. So never say never.
And what about quantum entanglement? Could that be a way? Could there be a way of detecting quantum entanglement as a communications that an extraterrestrial civilization would use?
Well, I get emails essentially every second week from people who think well, we'll just use quantum entanglement because that's instantaneous. And that way we can communicate with the aliens instantaneously. But it turns out that's not true. Quantum entanglement is indeed instantaneous, but it turns out that it doesn't allow you to send any bits of information faster than the speed of light. It's kind of a subtle thing. You have to kind of study the physics of quantum entanglement to understand why this is. But many physicists have assured me, forget it. You can't send instantaneous messages.
What about using greenhouse gases to look for alien civilizations?
Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to tell the carbon dioxide in your backyard, go find the aliens?
Well, I meant like detecting greenhouse gases on other planets.
Yeah, you could do that, but it's not such a simple experiment because if you look at the greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, the principal ones are carbon and methane, or carbon dioxide and methane. Now, the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere is a little bit more than it was, 10 years ago, 50 years ago. But how do you know, right? They didn't have the baseline. If you found, you can look at Venus, its atmosphere is dominated by carbon dioxide. Same for Mars, but it doesn't mean that they have, a Maserati stooling around the surface. So I think that that's a hard way to find the aliens. It sounds good, but I think it's hard.
Is there any other ways of looking for changes in the atmosphere for a civilization?
Well, one thing you can do is check the atmospheres for oxygen. If you find that, then at least you know that there's photosynthesis. Now, I don't know that that's a civilization. It's just a lettuce, but that's they're pretty civilized, but not all that much. But you could maybe chlorofluorocarbons. People have suggested that, right? Hairspray, essentially. But the amount of hairspray in our atmosphere, it was big enough to threaten the ozone hole for a while, but it would be very difficult to find that from 20 light years away. It's very hard. And not only that, but we decided it was a problem and we got rid of it. So it only had a lifetime of a few decades and then it was gone. And that's maybe not good enough if you want to be found.
I talked about alien civilizations. What's your thoughts on the confirmed footage from the Pentagon that was filmed by David Fravor? Many people think that could be of extraterrestrial origins. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, a lot of people do. You're quite right. In fact, half the American public, no, it's a third of the American public. A third of the American public thinks that aliens are visiting Earth, right? And so those are the ones that really like these TV shows about that. However, I think if aliens were really visiting Earth, that would be a big story. I mean, you would know it. It wouldn't be something kept secret. It's like saying, we're Europeans visiting the North American Indians in 1620. Well, yeah, but there was plenty of evidence for that. And in terms of aliens visiting Earth, the evidence is very poor. It's mostly anecdotal, or it's something like these Navy videos, like the Tic Tac video, looks like a dark peanut. Well, that could just be a jet, a commercial jet, 50 miles in front of the Navy jet, flying away from it. And remember, the cameras were infrared cameras. So you're just looking up the tailpipe of the two jets on the plane, and it looks like a peanut, right? So there are explanations for all those videos that don't require aliens. So you have to ask yourself, well, what do I want to believe? It was aliens, or it's something about the way the videos were made.
What's your thoughts on? So there's a scientist named Michio Kaku who claims that contacting aliens is a bad idea. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Michio indeed has said this. In fact, excuse me, Stephen Hawking also, made an oblique reference to this. I don't buy that either. I mean, to begin with, we are sending signals into space all the time, right? Where do you live? Are you on the East Coast?
East Coast.
Well, Logan Airport, which is the Boston airport, it's got these powerful radars and they're on 24/7, which is a good thing for people flying into Boston. But they're also, those signals go right out into space. So, if they're aliens with big enough antennas, they could pick up those signals and say, well, somebody's got an airport.
How about the idea of an alien civilization being dangerous for contacting it?
Yeah, I mean, you don't know, but this falls into the realm of alien sociology, about which we know nothing. I mean, maybe some aliens are dangerous, but keep in mind that any aliens that are dangerous or otherwise are going to be very far away, right? They're tens of light years at least. And that means if they had rockets like ours, it would take tens of thousands of years for them to get anywhere. Now, they may have faster rockets, but it's still a non-trivial problem to go from one world to another in the universe. It's just not easy. If you want to go to the moon, that's easy. If you want to go to Mars, that's pretty easy. But if you want to go to the nearest other star, that's really hard.
So what's your thoughts on, we talked about alien civilizations, being able to find them. Do you think the Drake equation is an accurate way of finding alien civilizations?
Yeah, the Drake equation is a great way to organize the ideas, the things that you should probably know if you're going to look for aliens. It was intended as the agenda for a meeting. It was never intended to be a predictor of, how many aliens are out there, but that's what it computes based on a whole bunch of things, most of which we still don't know. But it's a great organizational tool. You find it in all astronomy books.
What's your thoughts on Carl Sagan's idea of potentially there being a fourth dimension in which creatures could exist?
Well, I mean, if you take physics, they'll tell you that the fourth dimension is time. That makes sense from the standpoint of the mathematics of motion and mass. If you're not talking about time, I don't know what the fourth dimension might be. Sounds like a rock and roll group, but I mean, that's really in the realm of physics, not so much astronomy. And in fact, the current ideas about elementary particles, string theory, posits that there may be 11 dimensions on a very small scale to bits of matter. So we don't know how many dimensions there may be.
So people talk about claim that there's potentially alien civilizations visiting here already. So the U.S. government, for example, has like vehicles that visit other countries and they're not aware of it because they have stealth technology. Could a civilization, do you think it's a possibility that could be developing stealth technology that makes them unnoticeable to us?
Well, I don't know, but that's that's a total hypothesis, right? It's like saying when I go out to the parking lot, I don't see all the saucers parked there because they have stealth technology and I just can't see them. Well, I mean, maybe that's true, but it doesn't get you anywhere because you can't do any experiments that way or prove it in any way. So to say they have stealth technology and that's why we don't see them is, kind of a specious argument, I think. If you can't see them, what are you trying to prove? What's the point? Yeah, they're here. They're in my backyard, but you can't see them.
What's your thoughts on other frequencies for finding life, such as using infrared to find massive changes of thermal energy in certain areas of an exoplanet? Could that be used to find a civilization?
Well, it could. In particular, you could look for things called Dyson spheres, and you probably know what a Dyson sphere is. Just giant structures that the aliens have built, and of course, those structures will have a certain temperature. They won't be completely, at absolute zero temperature, and consequently, infrared telescopes like the James Webb Space Telescope might be able to find these things. So, sounds okay to me.
And what? So I saw. So you got you're the recipient of the Wonderfest 2015 Carl Sagan Award. What's your thoughts on the popularization of science?
Well, I think it's a good thing. I mean, people are interested in science, at least at some level. At least 15 or 20% of the population is interested in science. And that's good. I mean, it's important for society that people understand science. Whether or not they take a career in science is something else, but that they at least understand some basic things about science. And the way to get them interested is not to hand them a, graduate level textbook on string theory, but to, expose them to the ideas of science.
And do you think depopularization science will become more popular?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's been popular for a while. And, I'm not just thinking of Carl Sagan or Neil deGrasse Tyson or, Bill Nye, the science guy, or anything like that. This has been true for about 130 or 40 years. The United States has had science popularizers who would give talks or write books or whatever. So that's an old idea, an old activity, I really should say. And sounds like a good thing to do. I mean, most people say, oh, I don't understand that stuff. Well, they can understand it. Almost all of them can understand it.
And do you think, what do you think is getting people more interested in UFO technology? Like, even though like the evidence is becoming less and less clear that there's alien civilizations since radio astronomy began, but yet there's more interest in the possibility of an alien civilization.
Well, people like the idea that we're being visited. They've liked that ever since the late 1940s when the first reports, Roswell and all that stuff. I mean, people just love it. I don't believe the evidence is very convincing myself, but on the other hand, you got to say that if we are being visited by aliens, the aliens have been pretty good about it. They don't kill people. They don't, mess up traffic. They don't do anything really, except provide fodder for low budget television shows. And at that level, it's just fine.
How about for like the evidence for like just there being aliens out there in the universe? Like more people seem to be believing in it, even though there's less and less evidence towards there being one.
Well, I don't know that there's less and less evidence. The facts are that what we've done in the past, it's been now almost 30 years, is found planets around other stars. We hadn't found any prior to that. The beginning of 1995, we started finding planets around other stars. And now, based on the statistics of those discoveries, we know that maybe every second or third star that's a little bit like the sun, and that's a large category of stars, has a planet that's about the same size as the Earth and the same average temperature as the Earth. So there could be lots of cousins of Earth out there. And, that's good news for people who are thinking we might have some company in the stars.
I heard that there was a lot of with the radio telescopes finding civilization. There's been a lot of times where they thought they found one, but yet then later on it was proven that there wasn't.
Well, that happens, particularly with radio telescopes, because there's all these Earth satellites, swirling around up in the atmosphere there, and so you get signals all the time. When you point an antenna at the sky, you get signals all the time, and you have to sort out the Earth satellites from a real signal from deep space.
And is there anything that's becoming more promising about finding alien life?
Well, personally, and I mentioned this before, I think looking for artifacts is a good thing to do. Look, just do astronomy, but pay attention to anything that looks unusual. And in that sense, Oumuamua is an example. I don't happen to think Oumuamua is an alien craft, but at least that idea was broached. At least it was considered. It is considered. So that's the kind of thing that might help. Finding a signal is obviously the gold standard for SETI, but finding a signal requires that signal is arriving at your antenna just when you're looking. And that might be asking too much.
And when talking about alien life, what's the difference between there being like the high probability of, I guess, like non-intelligent life like bacteria versus intelligent life? How much of a difference in probability of a planet having those two different types of life?
I think it's an enormous difference. Just consider the Earth. If you had looked for intelligence on Earth, you're some alien. Well, you would have found some in the last 300,000 years, but there's been life on Earth for more like 4 billion years, and it wasn't very intelligent. For 80% of that time, it was just microbial. So I think that microbial life, if you will, stupid life, is going to be a lot more commonplace than intelligent life.
And in what proximity from the Earth in terms of like light years, do you think there's a high probability of there being another like civilization?
Well, our SETI experiments tend to look at stuff that's within 200 light years. And within 200 light years, there are about about a million stars. So a million star systems within 200 light years, that's just a tiny fraction of the distance to the other side of the galaxies. And yet you already have a million star systems, which, translate into probably several million planets, because you don't just get one planet per star, you usually get more. So, if you said, well, how far are the nearest aliens? Obviously, we don't know, but they could be within a couple of hundred light years.
And is there anything, do you think that we haven't been looking for that could be there in terms of looking for signals? Are there any types of frequency of signals that we haven't been looking for?
Well, I mean, there are lots of other kinds of signals. You could say, what about gravitational waves, muons, or all sorts of ways you can, sort of carry bits around. But it seems that electromagnetic radiation, which is to say light, radio waves, those sorts of things, can carry a lot of information at the speed of light with equipment that anybody can build. So it looks like a good bet.
And for alien civilizations, would there be any clear way of detecting one from, in the sense, if you look for like the remains of one on Earth, one visiting, if one visited let's say 25 million years ago, would there be any way of looking for that?
Well, I don't know. Ask yourself, suppose there was an early hominid 25 million years ago. Would you be able to detect that? Probably not. I mean, you might find some bones, maybe, but even that is pretty unlikely. I mean, if they left some big machine, then of course you would say, oh, well, that's it. But nobody has ever found that big machine.
And is there any, do you think there's SETI, when do you think SETI will gain the ability to look at potential, look for signals that are farther away, possibly beyond our galaxy?
Well, you can do it now, but you don't have much sensitivity. There's no limit to how far away, the signals could be. And the signals are, they don't disappear after going a certain amount of distance. They just get weaker. So if you have a big enough antenna, you can find signals at any distance. So it all depends on the aliens. Do they have a powerful transmitter, or are they all using walkie-talkies and cell phones?
Has SETI often looked for signals farther away beyond our galaxy?
Yeah, well, not often, but it has been done. It's been done many times, actually. Looking at other galaxies and seeing if they pick up any signals from there. They'd have to be very powerful.
Is there a high probability of there being civilizations in other galaxies?
Well, put it this way. I mean, if you go to Cuba and you find, various animals and plants, well, what are the probabilities that if you went to Africa, which is bigger than Cuba, that you would find plants and animals you didn't know about too? I mean, a big galaxy typically has a few 100 billion star systems, a trillion planets. It's quite likely they would have life.
I heard one theory for why there aren't many alien civilizations that we found yet is that 92% of star systems that have been found by telescopes are 92% younger than our own solar system. Could that be a possibility?
I don't think that's right, because the rate of star formation today isn't as high as it was, billions of years ago, right? Most of the stars out there, almost all of them, are younger than the sun, and some of them older than the sun, and some of them are much older, right? The stars in the center of our galaxy are, they were formed, some of them were formed very shortly after the Big Bang, a few 100 million years after the Big Bang. They've been around a long time. So if there are societies out there, some of them are going to be very much more advanced than ours.
And what's your thoughts on students who want to get involved in this search?
Well, I mean, if you want to do it for a living, it's very straightforward. You just, you got to go to school, get degrees in a relevant field. So that would be, physics or astronomy or even computer science. And you probably ought to go to grad school too, get an advanced degree, because everybody I know at the SETI Institute, all the research people have advanced degrees. So that's what you have to do. But, a lot of people do it. It's not so hard.
And finally, what is your message for students who want to work in the STEM field?
Well, in the STEM field is, huge. I mean, that's the future. I really do think so. Science has really changed the lives of all of us. We know that. And it's not just technology, right? It's health, it's all sorts of things. Excuse me, Ada. So, I think, you could say, I don't want to work in that field. I want to open up a restaurant. That's okay too. But if you have any interest in science or engineering, you can't go wrong. I think you can't go wrong.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, I hope you got something useful.
Oh, I did. It was awesome to have you on. Thank you so much.
All righty. Take care.
Okay, guys, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching this video. It was a great privilege to have Dr. Seth Shostak on. And comment down below what your thoughts are on this interview. And I hope you have a great day. And bye.
Versus 100.